This race seemed to be favoring the Democrats. Despite the fact that Alaska is a Republican stronghold, the polls and the predictions showed a clear lean to the left this election cycle. With the scandals both Representative Don Young and Senator Ted Stevens are embroiled in, coupled with well-funded quality challengers, it should have led to an easy Democratic victory. But it didn't. Despite the double-digit lead, all the polls gave to Young's challenger, Ethan Berkowitz, and Stevens' challenger, John Begich. Young was re-elected handily, and Stevens only lost by the narrowest of margins. And despite Stevens' eventual loss, the first few days after the election had Stevens leading Begich by more than 3,000 votes, leading many to predict his eventual victory. With the Democratic wave sweeping over the nation, led by President-elect Barack Obama, and Alaska's two Republican congressional candidates involved in ethical disasters, the two incumbents completely outperformed expectations. Why? Granted, Representative Young had been showing a slow but steady climb in the polls, as had Stevens prior to his conviction. But the very slight climb in the polls was not even close to the election results seen in the past few weeks. Many people hypothesized that the announcement of Sarah Palin as John McCain's vice presidential candidate energized the Republicans in Alaska to go out and vote for Stevens and Young. Before Governor Palin was named to the Republican ticket, McCain was pulling ahead by 4 to 10 points in Alaska. Afterwards, McCain was pulling ahead by 11 to 31 points, and Begich's lead was temporarily reduced from 13 to 3 points ahead. A more likely explanation is that Alaskan voters were simply too embarrassed to tell pollsters that they were voting for candidates seen by most as dishonest. The right-leaning voters of Alaska vehemently denounced the discredited Republican candidates to the pollsters, but in the secrecy of the voting booth couldn't find it in their hearts to vote for a Democrat. There is also the fact that polls in Alaska have been notoriously unreliable. Young even commented that, "The pollsters were wrong, and they've always been wrong. They don't understand Alaska." This election seems to be proof in point. When Sarah Palin ran for governor, over the course of the election season, polls had her up anywhere from 1 to 17 points. In the few days before the election, Palin was pulling ahead by merely 1 point. She won by 8. Although we are not sure of the cause of the failure in accurate polling, there are theories debating the amount of people without landlines, the accessibility of native populations, etc. It seems clear that there is an error somewhere. Another potential reason for the skewed election results was the failure of the Democratic Alaskans to bother to vote. The reasoning here is twofold. 1. Both Democratic congressional candidates were so ahead in the polling that Democrats simply assumed they would win, with Berkowitz up by 9 points and Begich up by 10.3. And 2. The electoral results for the presidential election were already in and showed a clear win for Obama. Both reasons might have led to Democrats staying home. Stevens, and to a lesser extent Young, are generally well known and well liked among Alaskans, mostly for the amount of pork sent home to their state. It's possible that many Alaskans couldn't bear to part with Uncle Ted and other familiar faces. In fact, Stevens' conviction was the most important factor for only 10% of the population, and only 41% of Alaskans considered it a decision-affecting factor. The idea of a familiar face and Young's lack of indictment are probably what saved him in this race. Based on the election results, we can postulate that had Stevens not been convicted, or not convicted so close to Election Day, he might have won as well. Especially since, even with Stevens' scandals and convictions, 11% of Democrats still voted for Stevens, with only 18% of Republicans crossing the aisle. All in all, Alaska firmly remains a right-of-center state. It seems the scandals were not enough to throw conservative Alaska firmly into the arms of the Democrats.